Finally got your first leadership gig, loving the new role, but feeling the pressure of your new responsibilities and all that expectation to perform? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Crossing the chasm from a technical role to leadership, from doing stuff to managing and leading people is the toughest challenge any leader must make. Welcome to the Human Edge Show, the podcast dedicated to help you do just that, successfully cross the doing to leading chasm. Campbell Such here, Chief Chasm Crossing Guide. I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I want to help you learn those lessons much more easily by sharing my experiences and talking with brilliant people who have already figured it out. You'll get great actionable tips, strategies, and techniques to make the transition so much easier and faster for you. Now let's get to it. Welcome to another episode of the Human Edge Show. Today I'm really privileged and honoured to have Mike Hutcheson on board for an interview. Mike, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on board.
All right, nice to be here.
Mike has spent most of his life working out what makes people tick and figuring out what they want and why. He grew up in Nelson after obtaining a Diploma of Fine Arts Preliminary. He studied law at Canterbury and Victoria Universities, didn't finish his law degree, but did break the world rocking chair record. He discovered advertising by accident, starting his career in Wellington, gained diploma in advertising, and in the process won the Trenchard-Smith Trophy for highest marks in Australia and New Zealand in the Advertising Institute examinations and the Reader's Digest Scholarship for New Zealand's Outstanding Young Advertising Man. He co-founded advertising agencies Colenso BBDO and Hutcheson Knowles Marinkovich. He culminated his advertising career in Auckland as managing director of Saatchi & Saatchi. He was director of a family building company in the early 80s, set up replica homes with franchises throughout New Zealand. In 2003, he launched the Lighthouse Ideas Company. He also set up Scarborough Fair, a fair trade organic coffee and tea marketing company, and planted Lonely Cow Vineyard on Waiheke Island. Lonely Cow wines sell exclusively in the US market through Nashville, Tennessee. Interesting town, Nashville, Tennessee. In 2008, he helped undertake a management buyout of Image Centre Limited, a printing and publishing group, which owns a stable of magazines, including Dish, Marketing, Idealog, NZ Retail, Good, and their attendant online versions. He is the director of a number of private and public companies. He has recently been inducted into the Marketing Hall of Fame. He has held numerous trustee positions, the Foundation of Youth Development and the Graham Dingle Foundation. I used to BidFood sponsored Project K, which Dingle was involved in, so it's got some links back to that. The Spirit of Adventure Trust, Vodafone Events Trust Centre, the Ray Blumenthal Friedman Trust, and was the Salvation Army Advisory Board on the Salvation Army Advisory Board in the mid-1980s. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing and a Master of Philosophy degree, first-class honours. His thesis was on the alchemy of innovation in New Zealand business. He is now an adjunct professor at Auckland University of Technology. Mike has written 5 books and award-winning innovation and humour columns for the Independent Business Weekly and Idealog magazine. He is a regular radio and television guest and commentator. Well, Mike, it's awesome to have you on the show. Thanks for agreeing to be here. I'd like to just kick off by asking you, what's something that not many people would know about you?
I've got ADD. And I get, when you read through that, I kind of cringe a little bit when I think back on the things I've done. But because I've got ADD, I've kind of taken the scenic route through life. And that, I guess, shows in the number of things that I've been involved with. Been involved in 9 startups, of mostly successful. I've launched lots of ships. Most have come back laden with treasure. Some have sunk without trace, but it's not too bad. My first 2 wives have got most of the treasure, but I just have a happy disposition, and I just look at life through the lens of, I'm only an accidental academic, and I look at life through the lens of an artist, really. I think visually. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with a psychologist talking about how you think, and the best way I could explain it in terms of thinking visually is that my skull is empty, and don't laugh, but I imagine my skull as being a movie theatre. There's a projector at the back here shining down on the screen, which is the front of my skull, the white brone in the front of my skull. I imagine it's empty. And I can often shut my eyes and visualize things by watching the screen in the front of my head, and so that that's the way I look at the world. It's a very much a visual connection. I take my sketchbook everywhere because I did my fine arts prelim, and I'm not a great artist, but I'm an okay artist, and I sketch with pen or pencil. And I take my sketchbook everywhere I go. When we visit a new city or a new country, I'll sit down and draw some things, and because there's some great research that came out of the University of Waterloo in Toronto a couple of years ago. It said the ability to draw doubles your chances of recall. And I found that. And when I think back in my, I've probably got, I don't know, a couple hundred sketches in my sketchbook, but I've probably got 4,500, 5,000 photographs in my camera. I can remember very few of those photographs. I have to just scan through them, but I could probably redraw most of the sketches in my sketchbook from memory. And that's, to me, an insight because I look at the world through a visual lens. So that's probably the thing that isn't immediately apparent, because we all look the same. We've all got two arms, two legs, and a head, and you can't tell from the outside what the hell's going on in somebody else's mind. As my wife said, there's mostly a party going on in my head, pretty much all the time. But I capture it visually. So that's, I guess, the bit that is otherwise unknown or not immediately apparent.
Yeah. How early in your life did you realise that you were so visual, and that was the way, that you had this movie screen on the inside of your forehead that you projected your visions or visuals?
I can't tell you the date, but I know I was about 11, and I can tell you the day. I was lying on the floor of my grandparents' house, and my father had recently died and went to live with my grandparents, and my grandfather was a great leader of the Illustrated London News, and there was a magazine on the rack, and it was around the time of, some years after, I guess, but there was a boat called HMS Amethyst, a Royal Naval yacht that had gone up the Yangtze River to rescue Brits from the enclave at Shanghai, and then back down the river again, being shot at by the communists on either way. And I was quite impressed with this. When you're 11 years old, well, that's a boy's own story. Yeah. And there was a photograph of this destroyer going down the Yangtze River full of bullet holes, and I drew it. And I suddenly realised that my hand will go where my brain wants it to go. I can draw things. And I had no particular formal art training. In fact, our art lessons at school at that stage were terrible. You had to draw the face of the guy in the desk next to you. And I remember actually being caned for he had freckles, and I spent a lot of time putting freckles on his face because I thought he was like a little bugger anyway. But and I remember the art teacher saying that was not right and sent me away to be caned because I wasn't taking it seriously. So I never took art seriously at that point, but realized that I could do it. Yeah. And again, because my father was a school teacher, the notion of ever being anything to do with pedagogy was anathema to me. And because my father, being a returned serviceman, he did his military training in Sandhurst. He had a degree in English and French at the time, and he was a very young man. He he enrolled as soon as war was declared, and because he had a degree, he sent them to Sandhurst. So he came back both as a soldier and a teacher, and he became my headmaster. So by the time I was 10 years old, I'd done my military service. I wasn't allowed to be born, and he was the headmaster of the boarding school. So I wasn't allowed to be late for breakfast or split my infinitives. So I learned very often what I could and couldn't do, but teaching was the furthest thing from my mind. So, but I thrust into a role because he died young. When I was young, he was very badly wounded during the war and just didn't survive his wounds. So that's quite. So I kind of assumed a role as the eldest son at a quite an early age. I wasn't a very good eldest son, but I had to do that. Yeah.
So it sounds like you moved into leadership by chance early in your life through the death of your father, sad death of your father. Yeah. Can you just take us back to those sort of days early, perhaps in your first recognition of your leadership roles that you had that were perhaps thrust upon you in a more of a social environment, and then perhaps into some of your early roles, or your earliest role, or your earliest recollection of your role in a business situation or in a work environment where you moved from a technical role into a leadership role, and what that was like, and how new leaders might consider their journey into leadership and how that might help them.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything I could recommend. I can only really repeat what my journey was, and because I didn't think I was a particularly good student, although I did Diploma of Fine Arts prelim in my seventh form year at school. But I was, there's a bit of backstory here, which has led to one of the rabbit holes I went down. In my final year, I did a Diploma of Fine Arts prelim and got into Ireland. And so I was then, because only two things I can do are write and draw. I've got no marketable skills apart from writing and drawing. Hopeless with mathematics, and a reasonably solid IQ, and so I could pick things up. But it was mostly about storytelling and drawing, and that was my gig. And so, but in my final week of school, I was told that I couldn't have first place in class because I'd only done art and English, and the foreman said, "But the other boys were doing proper academic subjects. How do I compare, your marks in oil painting with the guys doing very well in mathematics?" I said, "Well, I don't know, sir, and I suspect it's harder to get an A in oil painting than it is in mathematics, though, sir." He said, "Well, don't be rude." And anyway, he didn't even judge it, didn't even grade me. He said, "This is ridiculous." He said, "And the sculpture, what is a sculpture? You make pots." I said, "No, so we actually have to remodel Michelangelo's David's hand and nose and ears." It's quite classical stuff. And he had no concept of what it was. And he said, "Well, I'm going to leave you off because I can't compare you to what the other boys have done, so you don't even get a grade." And I was really upset with that because the guy who went and got first place in class went on to do accounting and became a merchant banker. So I've got a deep and abiding loathing of people who do accounting and merchant banking, because it's a personal wound for me. And so the lens I now bring to the world is that the visual lens, the creative lens. And anyway, so I got the PIP. I didn't go to Ireland. I'd been accepted in, but I turned it down and ended up enrolling in law school, which is a silly mistake because I found it very, very boring. After 2 years, I said, "Look, I can't stand this." Yeah. And fortunately, I discovered advertising by mistake or by accident. And there's a business that people write and draw. Whoa, that's mine. And so it's been, and that was kind to me. And that was it. But I realized then, and I thought, I'm going to make a real go of this. And so I did as you said in my bio, and I sat down and I swallowed hard for my advertising diploma, and scored, as I said, with highest marks in Australasia and way back then. And not that it meant very much, but yeah, it was kind to me. And I got selected as one of the candidates for a scholarship to go to Australia, Reader's Digest scholarship, and New Zealand's outstanding young advertising man, which makes me cringe now. But we were interviewed by what was then the Council of the Advertising Agencies Association. I'm going to dinner with these who I thought was elderly gentlemen. I was all 21. These elderly gentlemen who were sort of sitting around and having dinner. And as far as I could tell, I got selected based on my table manners. I don't think they asked us any questions. Yeah. But we did sit around and have dinner with these guys. There were three of us who were obviously quizzed, and for whatever reason, they gave me a tick. So I thought, I suffer badly from imposter syndrome. Even when I was younger, I'm getting the school cert results and being absolutely blown away. I got quite a high mark, and in fact, I got my mate John Little to actually open the envelope because I was too scared to open it, and I got quite a high mark. And I think for the next 3 or 4 days, I kept watching the mailbox in case a letter arrived saying there's been a terrible mistake and we've mixed your results up with somebody's brainy, and it was, I always felt that way. I always felt inadequate. They can't really believe it. Even now, and I do quite a bit of public speaking and presenting, and you realise that no matter how little you think you know, it's probably more than somebody else who hasn't really thought about it in a critical sense. Yep. And I did learn critical thinking, and that's the one thing I do recall being taught by my father, my headmaster, that question everything, don't take anything for granted. And so I think I learned critical thinking at a young age, and I think also because he actually took his own life, and so it was, or he'd been, if you like, a warrior, badly wounded, pretty sort of shot up, and it made me realize that nothing is ever as it seems. I didn't articulate it mentally at that stage, but I knew that life can sometimes deal you a bad hand, but you've got to take it. But and I did learn, I guess, that if things are, I used to think that things are seldom as they seem. I now know that nothing is as it seems, because and so not a cynical view, but a skeptical view of most things, and that's the essence to me of critical thinking, and that helped in lots of ways because. But then I was given these roles because people, again, imbued me with qualities I didn't think I had. But when you compare it, you think, well, that's not too bad. And I remember thinking that in athletics and swimming, I wasn't a great athlete, but I was quite quick, and I realised then, and was taught by our athletics coach, not to look left or right when you're running. Look at the tape, and just focus on what you're doing. And if you look left or right, you'll be distracted what somebody else thinks or says or does. But by focusing on the tape, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, but at least you get there with some kind of credibility and credence. And so I just realised that that's part of what leadership is about, because people respect you for doing whatever you do well. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is really about, you don't have to be good at everything, but if you do your best and you get known for being good at one thing. I remember, when I was at Cubs, even quite a young age, I was a sixer and at Scouts. I was a patrol leader, and I was too much of a maverick at school to be a school boy. I was a house prefect, and because I was a bit mavericky. I got caned quite a lot at school, mostly for insubordination, and being a stroppy bastard. Yeah. And by the time I got to the seventh form, upper sixth, then I had more notches in my belt than anyone else in the class. Some guys, the ones that had a lot more notches than me, had left long ago. But by the time I got there, I realised that I was a little bit of an outsider, and always felt a little bit of an outsider. And that's another thing about leadership too. I think you when you're a leader, it doesn't pay to get too close to those who you're working with or any subordinates. And you can be their respected colleague rather than their best friend. I think sometimes it's a mistake that some leaders make, that they get too chummy with the people who work for them, because sooner or later you're going to have to make a hard decision, and that's going to hurt. But I kind of got through life, and again, because the old man died when I was quite young, we moved around a bit, so I never had any. I think I went to 9 schools, been to 3 universities, but I didn't have those deep mates from age 5 to age 25. I learned to be independent and learned to think differently. My mother was very devout, and I was in the Nelson Cathedral choir. I mean, I was actually quite steeped and quite a. I thought at one stage of even going into the church. I mean, I read the Bible from cover to cover and ended up being an atheist. So that there are, but I can quite pretty much chapter and verse, so I know what it's about, and I can have a pretty convincing conversation with pretty much anybody from any faith about those things, because I learned a lot. And again, I suppose that was the other good thing, because my father was headmaster of a private school, and it was holiday time. I had the school to myself. And I wasn't supposed to, but I'd sit and I'd hide behind the shelves of the library and just soak up as much stuff as I could. And a lot of Greek myths, Arthurian legends, Nordic myths. I was interested in historical novels, and I loved maps. I was absolutely fascinated with maps and geography. So I mean, you're reading widely and reading well gives you a wealth of stuff to draw on.
Mike, just going back to your earliest memories of your work life, you obviously had a real talent, even if the imposter syndrome thing says, like for many of us, maybe they'll find me out, and I'm not really as good as I might appear to be with this stuff, right? And so I suspect, and I'm guessing here, but you tell me if I'm sort of off the mark, you would have been phenomenally good, at the creative writing and drawing. So high level of technical skills and a really big intellect that sort of sat across the top of that. And then at some point you went from doing that stuff to leading people doing stuff. Can you recall your first steps into that, and how you coped with moving away from the stuff you loved, and how you've hung on to the stuff that you've loved and built your career around your strengths, which are the writing and drawing, and how others might consider stepping away from a technical role into a leadership role?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question, because I didn't even think about it. And I was quite flattered to be given leadership roles. I ended up, though, later, most of my working career, I've felt that there were, in a leadership role, people were hanging off me. Get off me. And I actually like doing the work. I actually did not. Later in my career, in my 50s, I realized I actually hate being a CEO, because you suddenly get preoccupied with replacing the copying machine, or making sure that everyone's and got a car park, or I need a salary increase for 5 years, or batting off irate clients, and doing those things that are peripheral, apologising or being bogged down in But when I first moved from, I started off as a copywriter at Charles Haynes in Christchurch and Wellington, and before we moved to Christchurch, I remember my first ad that I was asked to write, going to Mr. Hughes, who was the copy chief, and in those days there was quite a different structure in ad agencies, and I wrote my first ad and went into him and put this ad across his desk. He didn't even look at it. He just looked at me and said, "Is that your best work?" And I mean, apparently it's an old, I didn't know, apparently it's an old trick, but he put it back on me, and I realized, jeepers, I better figure this out. So I took it away and said, I'm just checking the commas in the right place, and no apostrophes, all that sort of stuff. And I thought it was a nice bit of erudite prose, and went back and said, "Are you absolutely sure that's your best work?" And again, without even looking at it. And so I sort of go, "Well, one more minute." And I thought, "Well, I've got no idea." And I took it away and then came back. "Yes, I'm convinced." And he picked it up and then read it. He said, "Oh, yeah, it's not too bad." And I just, and that was a great lesson to me, to have self-belief. And to think, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. And I remember thinking again, when we, those 2 or 3 years we did our advertising diploma exams at night school and stuff at Wellington Polytechnic, and then thinking, I can do this. I know this. And I remember going to the exam room thinking, I'm going to do really well at this because I know this stuff backwards. And that self-confidence helps yourself. So even if you don't know how you're going to compare to other people, it's only when, again, like, you don't worry about what they're doing, but you just go into the room and think, I'm confident I can do this.
Yeah.
I remember reading a great story about Pele, the footballer, who said he and you're in flow. I realise that that's that notion of flow when you, it's the Haley Csikszentmihalyi, the notion of you're so absorbed with what you're doing, time passes.
Yep.
And other people outside you are almost irrelevant. And Pele said that he could imagine with the football, he could actually walk through people or run through them, as if they were ghosts. And I remember thinking that, and some of the stuff that I felt I was good at, in writing and drawing, I felt I could just waltz through this in my mind, in my little camera, in my movie theater, in my head. It was just there. So it's that self-belief, but without arrogance, because you don't know how you compared to anybody else. But when you do it, you sort of realize, oh, I won that. And it wasn't as if you were trying to beat anybody. You were just doing it to the best of your ability. And then when other people recognize that gives you the cred to be something of a leader yourself. As you get followers, because, and it's not followers in a guru sense, but respect.
Yep.
For what you know.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I try and hang on to now. No matter how little I think I know, I've had enough mileage in a lot of things to be able to help other people do that.
Yeah.
I felt in my stage of my career now, I want to give back. And when I did my thesis, I developed this periodic table of innovation, which is a summary of all the mistakes I've made in my business career. And I think if I can help other people avoid those same mistakes, I've done something. And so you leave a bit of a legacy, not by talking about what you've done, but by showing other people how to do it better.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. Not talking about it, but sort of show, not tell, right? So you're actually delivering some value. Then, so when you, because I can see there's within you, there's that strong technical requirement, but you ended up in leadership, and there'd be plenty of people that end up in leadership roles that still love what they did on the tools, whether it's a software developer, whether it's a creative writer, whether it's a copywriter, whatever it happens to be. How did you reconcile those, and what did you do to make sure that you kept your love of your technical skills alive while still managing to keep everyone away, as you put it, or manage through that process of the people management piece rather than the doing piece? How did you sort of reconcile those and fit them together?
I guess by showing, not telling. In the I would actually give it here, I'll do it. And so I didn't do a lot of over the years, but I'd pick up a script, or write a script, or produce a video or whatever. I mean, I did my thesis as a television documentary rather than 300 pages of double-spaced Times Roman, because it was a thesis on creativity. I thought, can I do it creatively? And so, what do you mean? I said, well, can I do it as a TV documentary? Oh, no one's done that before. Well, good. This is a precedent. So when I could pick up the tools or exercise my skills, that was the bit that I enjoyed most, and that was always when I was in flow. Even now, I do a little blog with cartoons and bits and pieces, and I'll fire off the occasional op-ed and so on. But I'm most absorbed when I'm writing something, doing another book or an essay. So I just kind of do it when I could. Because your first priority is to the shareholders and the business. But I've always been, apart from my stint at Saatchi's, I've always been either an owner or a partner in the business. I'm not very good at minding somebody else's store. I'm much better if I'm doing it myself. I shouldn't say this, but I mean, the ideal committee in my mind is an odd number between 0 and 2. But you have to seek other people's advice, and that I like too, because by recognizing what you do yourself and understanding what your strength is, you can surround yourself with people who compensate for what you're not. And that's really important. It's interesting, when I was at Saatchi's, we got a psychologist. It's always puzzled me why it's so hard for creative people to sell ideas to non-creative people. And we got a psychologist to come and spend a week in the agency and watch how we behaved. He said, look, tell us at the end why our clients don't recognize our genius and do what we say. And she put us through Myers-Briggs. I think we did human brain dominance and something else as well, but we ended up with Myers-Briggs. And all the senior team at Saatchi's were on the intuitive side of the ledger. We were all N's. And she said, there's your problem. The CFO was the only one who was an S. So most of us were intuitive, and the only guy who was non-intuitive was the CFO. And she said, there's your problem, because most of your clients will be non-intuitive. Our biggest clients then were telecom and line. So they're public companies. They basically exist on quarterly reporting and public consultation. They want facts and figures. They don't want any airy-fairy nonsense, waving our arms around saying, look at this magic idea, prove that will work. And that was one of the great paradoxes in business. People who are S's, 76% of the population is S's. So there's your problem. You're outnumbered 4-1, and they've got all the money. So what they don't want any of your, imagine, if you will, and wouldn't this be terrific? They want you to prove that idea you've got will work. And the problem there, of course, and that's the problem in life and any business, is that the future is by definition imaginary. And 76% of the population don't have imagination. So how can we expect that? That's crazy, and that's in government circles and local authority circles. Bureaucrats make decisions about the future, which is imaginary, and they've got no imagination. No wonder we have so many cock-ups. And so that harbour bridges with 4 lanes, without predicting the fact that the population is going to quadruple over the period of all that stuff. Bus lanes, when buses are going to go outside, we're going to have self-driving cars. I mean, just nuts. Sorry, I won't. Stop me going down rabbit hole. Sorry,
that was a very interesting rabbit hole. Mike, I just want to bring you back to. We'll slightly change gears around away from the leadership directly into leading leaders. And when a leader promotes a new person into a person to a new leadership role, or a new person into a leadership role, but particularly someone that's never been in leadership before, what's been your experience, or what have you observed, or what have you found works well to try and make it as smooth as possible, and to make it as least likely that they'll fail and much more likely that they'll succeed in that new role? What do you think are the critical things that a leader should be doing when they put someone into a new leadership role that's never been in a leadership role before?
They have to be a subject matter expert in some fields. So in other words, they have to be able to garner respect for whatever it is that they do, and they have to be able to communicate. I think communication skills or storytelling is probably a fundamental preset. So yes, technical skills are there. Obviously, intelligence is there, and I think that there's a kind of a flaw. It needs to be IQ-ish, probably north of 120. So there has to be like a sharp intelligence, able to think critically, but also to be collaborative. Collaborate and communicate, and then have courage of conviction, so that you enable somebody. Don't set them up to fail. Make sure that the role that they're in, if it takes them off the tools, then you've got to be careful that they can add more being off the tools than they would have been on the tools. And certainly in advertising, and frequently we'd pay creative directors more than we're paying ourselves in management roles. It's not necessarily the CEO who has the big ticket. Very often leave somebody who's very good and is a rare talent in that role and reward them well. Make them and also allow them to have autonomy, and create an environment for them, and don't try and overmanage them, but give them hope and joy. Allow them to express themselves as much as possible, and surround them with all the right tools. Good reporting structures, good assistance, and let them make mistakes, not more than once. But let them but cover up for and just monitor them. Don't boss them. Just be there and have them make sure that the reporting structures are right, and make sure that they've got good financial literacy, but most of all, commercial literacy. Financial literacy doesn't mean over focus on minor details, but understanding where money's to be made, and having good rules of thumb. The rules of thumb about charging out, for example, the rules of thumb about establishing some kind of retainer structure or fee structure, knowing where the money's coming from, making sure that they manage cash flow and all those things, but surround them with all those structures that enables them to do that, but mostly to go in new directions, because you only make progress if you break rules. If you follow rules, eventually you'll atrophy and die. You need to. I mean, our national game was a game based on someone picking up the ball and running with it. That should be part of our Kiwi DNA. And that was the other thing that was interesting. When I did my thesis, it was on the alchemy of creativity in the New Zealand business, and I thought it would be a slam dunk. Kiwi ingenuity, we're there. Well, we are and we aren't. By almost all the international indices, like the Economist Creativity Index, the Martin Productivity Index, we're in the top 10 in the world. For example, we're number 6 in the world at authoring reports in high-tech publications, but we're only 63rd in the world behind Senegal and Bulgaria about high-tech manufactured output. What? I mean, Callahan and Hendy pointed this out some years ago. Why is it the country that scores so well in all the indices on innovation and creativity, we perform so badly economically. The insight is that our best and brightest leave because they have to go away to scale, to find the money and to scale, because our focus and our governmental focus is on the poor and the underprivileged, not on the achievers. And we don't have a very good or well-structured financial and investment market here. And so again, a lot of Kiwis do very well. I know in Saatchi's, probably a third of the offices around the world either run by or certainly have Kiwis in senior positions. And our strength, and I've actually made this point at the university as well, and I don't think anyone really bears it out, but our DNA is about being good generalists. And certainly my experiences when I go to the States or the UK, the specialists in their various fields will absolutely lick us. But when we're in a situation of being a good generalist, we win hands down.
Yeah.
Because we have to be good at lots of different things. I remember being in a conference, in Harvard Business School conference in New York some years ago, and it was at a stage where our agency was growing fast, HKM was growing fast, and we were had to handle a few mergers. But when you have mergers, of course, there's only so many seats on the new bus, and you have to let some people go. And so this conference, I was in a breakout group or a breakout workshop with a guy called David Novak, who was head of Tracy Locke in Dallas. Tracy Locke, as an agency, had a turnover the size of the entire New Zealand advertising industry. And we were like tiny at that time. But this Harvard Business School professor, HR guy, and David were in this workshop. And it was about culture fit. How do we get people in new situations to work together? Their problem in Texas was they couldn't hire enough local recruits. And they had to get guys down from the Chicago and New York office. And he said, they just don't fit in. I mean, our guys wear hats and boots, and these guys come down with their dark suits and their little black ties. They just don't fit in, And this Harvard guy said, well, no, actually, because we had to, submit all our business plans and financials to these guys, so they knew what our issues were. And Mr. Hutchison, I believe that you've had to let some people go recently, and because with the new merger, there's so many people, it's like the bacon and eggs thing. Fine for the hen, got to be commitment to be the pig. And so he said, how does that work? And David Novak said, jeepers. He said, what do your HR people think about that? You had to, fire 13 people? And I said, HR people? HR people? You must be joking. And I suddenly realized that he had never hired or fired anybody. I said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, we need some new personnel in one of our groups. We ring HR and they send someone up. I said, what if they're good? We ring HR and they take them away. And I suddenly thought, we do all those things. Now, we are in charge of logistics, distribution, sales, procurement, IT. And all of us in this country, we have to, as if you're a CEO, you do all those things. Yeah, we may not be as good a specialist in any one of those things as an American might, but we have to have a good handle on all that. And that's where my periodic table of innovation came out. It's already a periodic table of business, all the things you have to think about. And that is a unique thing. And that's why Kiwis do so well when they go offshore. And that's why our best and brightest go offshore to do it and do very, very well, because we don't have a well-established financial or investment community here.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. But so to me, give people a job before they're ready, and help them. Don't hold their hands, but watch, not patronizingly, but be observant as to how they get on, and monitor them, and then be prepared to have a fireside chat with people, because there's no, in my view, there's no real rules about it. It's just the obvious things. It's about good manners and common sense. And often people ask me, well, what should I read? In a marketing textbook to make myself better. I said, well, start with Shakespeare. Shakespeare's pretty cool. He said a lot of good things, But this above all, to thine own self be true. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. I mean, any banker could tell you that now. But when Shakespeare said it, it talks to the heart. And the other thing that I try and drum into people is to be a good storyteller and understand, because people don't respond to facts and figures. People respond to narratives that they can take on board and own themselves. And I remember, again, the old man saying there's only 10 stories in the world. And lots of English teachers I've asked that question all my life. And it's only recently I read a book called 7 Basic Plots by Christopher Booker. And I've done a lot of research on this, and there are lots of answers. I mean, you could say there's any number from 1 to 100, but Christopher Booker wrote this amazing book called 7 Basic Plots. And basically he's studied cultures over the last 2,000 years, from Laplandic reindeer herdsmen to Papua New Guinea, West cannibals, and US West, and all cultures, he said, have 7 common themes in their narratives. And they're overcoming the monster, which is a David and Goliath story, St. George and the Dragon. But there's also Jaws, sleepy little village, along comes the monster, gobbles up the villagers, reluctant hero emerges, slays the monster, everything back to normal. I mean, and that as a plot is a remake of Beowulf, and it was written 1,500 years ago. And when you go through it, and then there's a rebirth story, which is an ugly duckling story. I'm not really a swan. I'm not really a duck. I'm a swan. Then there's Rags to Riches story, which is Aladdin and his magic lamp. But it's also Pretty Woman. It's the Quest. The Quest is the Iliad, the Odyssey. There's also the Hobbit, or Lord of the Rings. And that's the other thing that I think, as Kiwis, we're a little bit like hobbits. It's no coincidence that the movies were made here, because that's us. We're brave little people from the bottom right-hand corner of the world. We're brave not because we're particularly courageous. We're just too stupid to be scared. We don't have any natural predators. There's no snakes or spiders out there that little wild animals that'll kill us. And we actually end up being quite naive in some of those things, and which is it's a blessing and a curse. That we are very open about those things and take those things in, and actually also think that's what also makes us quite good leaders. It's a famous story about during Second World War, before the Battle of El Alamein, General Freyberg was taking Field Marshal Montgomery through the New Zealand lines in a staff car. And Monty said, they're not very well disciplined, are they, Freyberg? And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, they're not saluting. And he said, no, but if you wave from them, they'll wave back. And I think that there are those kind of stories that stand us in good stead, because we're self-effacing, but quite, and we can be quite tough, but we're not afraid. We're unafraid of doing those things, and I think that's a good Kiwi characteristic also for leadership too. We'll give it a go. And again, that's some of the stuff that came out of my thesis. It was just, we'll have a crack at that. I could do that, and I think that can stand us in good stead. The sad bit is our best and brightest go away.
Yeah,
and we're left with bureaucrats here who are too afraid to step off the shore.
So as a leader, what can you do to try and encourage and help your best and brightest to stay in your team and to remain and not to fly the nest and head out from New Zealand? Any thoughts on that?
Well, that was really the thrust of my thesis, and that was and building up a case around that periodic table of business to all the things you need to know, all the things you need to do. To dial up or dial down. It's a matrix it's like a due diligence tool. It's a way of validating ideas. Yep. So if you give people the right tools, they'll feel confident and give it a go. So give them good equipment, give them good training, and give them responsibility sometimes before they're even ready for it. So they grow into it. And that's what our fathers did.
For the people that you recognise that have the innate talent or the ability to have enough around the people side of things and have a desire to move, not necessarily completely away from the tools, but also to round out and make it a broader skill set that they've got, where they can manage people, and then you help them get into those roles perhaps earlier than what they might otherwise be.
I think that's exactly it. I think it's because and when I know for myself, I'm not great. I'm not a great artist, but I'm quite good. But I could never make a living out of it. But I can judge it when I see it. I'm not a brilliant writer, but I'm quite a good writer, and I recognise good writing when I see it. So that and then again is part of leadership, being able to know what good looks like.
Yeah.
And you only know what good looks like if you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
Even.
And that way, as you go further and further up the leadership ladder, if you like, into more and more senior positions, the technical piece becomes less and less you're doing it, but more and more important that you understand it so that you can surround yourself with people that aren't just knowing you and you can see through the false facades and the smoke and mirrors and know that's something that's worth listening to and that's not.
Yeah. And you're not, and you can't define it or describe it or even in a way teach it. You've got to experience it. When I in the wrath of some people at the university when I produced my program, because they asked when I finished my thesis in this, they asked me to turn it into an e-learning program, and of course it's anathema to classroom teaching because I turned it into an online program, and I got called into a group saying, "What's this program you've got about entrepreneurship and innovation?" I said, "Well, I don't believe you can teach entrepreneurship." And this woman said, "Well, the research says you can." And I said, "Well, my experience tells me you can't." I said, "It's like riding a bike. You can't learn to ride a bike by reading a book. You've actually got to." I said, and then like a fool because of my Tourette's, I said, "It's like the Kama Sutra. And you can read about it, but in the end, you've got to do it." And it was a stupid thing to say in this wokeness period that we are living in at the moment. But it's true. You've got to do so. And it was frowned on what I'd done because it was only based on my experience in business, the whole program. But it wasn't based on academic research. I did point out that Christopher Columbus didn't discover America by following well-researched cartography. He just went and did it. You can only research something after someone's had the balls to actually get out and do it. And it's that whole aim fire ready rather than ready aim fire. And I think that's the essence of again, entrepreneurship. Give people, let them take risks, give them the responsibility and let them go into the wild blue yonder, because if you stay doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
Mike, one of the things that I'd just like to pick up on that you talked about before was how important it is to learn storytelling. And I suspect some of us are natural born storytellers, and many of us, if not most of us, really struggle with what this means. You mentioned a book, The Plots by Christopher Booker. Yep. Could you just talk a little bit to, if you were a leader looking to use storytelling to help lead better, where would you go with that, and how would you get better at it, or understand what it is and then grow your skills?
Okay. All right. Well, for example, when if we had a creative brief to produce, and I use it now. In fact, I just talked about it last week with one of the groups I'm working with. You'd try and frame the task that you're given. Say you're producing a campaign for a client, or you've got a business that requires a certain approach. Say you're
How about, Mike, just sorry to interrupt you for a sec, but how about it's a new project that you're trying to kick off and take your team or the company in a new direction, which is some new functionality in their software system, some new business opportunity that you want to pursue. If you could just wrap it a little bit around that.
Oh, okay. Well, you could frame it as an overcoming the monster story.
Okay.
So if you're a bank or you've got a new financial software package that you're trying to introduce, frame it as if it were an overcoming. The monster is debt, or the monster is a huge data pool, or whatever it is. So that's the monster you've got to overcome. And who's the hero? It's your software. So you frame it as, and you'd find a story that you could tell that exemplified that. Which could be a St. George and the Dragon type story, or it could be a Jaws type story. Oh my God! Or if you're Westpac and you're trying to get some new customers, you don't. I'll tell you an example. Great example. At Sanchez, we were pitching the Telecom Extra business, and the brief from Telecom was all about, I think it was 3G at that time. It was all about amps and ohms and gigabytes and blah, 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 blah. And I said to them, and so it was quite a detailed technical explanation of what the internet was doing, and how good Extra was at solving this problem. And I'm saying to the guys, look, I don't think that's it at all. And it happened to coincide with that movie Saving Private Ryan, must be early 2000s. Saving Private Ryan came out. And because my old man had been through, he was very badly wounded in Italy towards the end of the war. And like the Tom Hanks character in the movie was an ex-school teacher, citizen soldier who had gone to war. And I said to my kids, because I hardly knew my own father. I was 10 when he took his own life, but my kids, of course, never knew him. I said, look, you should, and I bribed them with a pizza. I said, look, why don't we all go and have a little family gathering at the movie theatre, and I'll buy you a pizza afterwards and so on. And I photocopied the pages out of the battalion, because at the end of the war, the government paid for histories of all the fighting units. And because he was a company commander, there were a lot of mentions of him. And it also mentioned the night that he was wounded. And I photocopied the pages that talked about him and gave them to the kids and to my brother. And I remember my mother having been given this book after the war, but I never read it. And I was a bit ashamed, because it wasn't a place I wanted to go, and because he had said he had topped himself and so on. And it was the first time I'd actually read it. And my brother rang and said, look, I reckon we can identify the place where Dad was wounded to within a couple of 100 metres. I said, you're joking. And sure enough, I went in there, and it said that battle that night started on the banks of the Rio Fontanace, between the railway line and the sea. And sure enough, in the history, there was this ordnance map of where this was, and the movement of certain companies and battalions and shit. And I went online, because we were researching Telecom Extra, and there was no Google then, but it was Alta Vista. I think I keyed in Rio Fontanace, and sure enough, a page in the local newspaper, Corriere del Rimini, and it was the anniversary of the liberation of the town by New Zealanders. And so, and it was all in Italian, of course, but it mentioned Neo-Zelandese and Freiburg and Kippenberger and stuff. And at the end, the last paragraph, would you believe, it said, alla fine, la maggiore Hutcheson si accampa con la sua della fossa Taketa. Oh, fuck. I mean, how did someone 55 years on write the story knowing that my father and his men camped on the banks of the Rio Fontanace? That is just, whoa. So I got an Italian friend to write to this newspaper. I said, what was that about? And I had this amazing correspondence with this Professor Montemaggi, who'd written lots of books about the Gothic. I'd even heard of the Gothic line, but there were more munitions on the Gothic line than there were on D-Day. It was just it was amazing. And it was that what Churchill called the soft underbelly of Europe, wanted to go up into the Balkans, and he was trying to convince Eisenhower, slow down going to Berlin, stop the Russians getting to the Balkans, and all this sort of geopolitical stuff. But anyway, there was the story. And I said to the guys, that's what the internet's about. That is storytelling. That is about a quest. It's not about gigs and ohms and bytes and 65 BGs and stuff. Nothing about technical. The internet is about storytelling. And I said, find a story that actually matches that, and you'll inspire your people to that. And so anyway, we went and we won the patch, hands down. Apparently, everyone was in tears, because there was the technical stuff coming to light through a story.
Wow. Yeah.
And you don't want to lay on with a trowel, but you think in the context of what's the narrative for the problem we're solving here that will inspire people or galvanize them to act in a certain direction. And the point that Booker makes, I think it's in the bookshelves downstairs, it's quite a hefty book because it's very well researched, and I'd hate to try and he must have spent decades putting all this together. But you get it in the first chapter, the overcoming the monster, the quest, voids and return, comedy, tragedy, rebirth, all those stories. There are only 7 of them, and you can frame pretty much anything you like around one of those narratives and try and draw on something that will inspire people. So that I look for that all the time, and then give those tools to someone coming into a new role.
Nice. That's awesome. That's fantastic, Mike. That's really cool. No one, I don't think we probably don't think about storytelling enough, and it's this kind of thing that sort of sits around going, yeah, I should know about that, or maybe I should do something about that, but perhaps I'm not, and I don't even know where to start. So maybe that book, or I'm sure there's plenty of information on the internet that you can get. Yeah, through Extra.
Yeah, well, but that's it. Yeah, it's all there if you know where to look. Yeah. And the sad thing, and the thing I also try and get people, don't focus on the tech stuff. I mean, the most important skills required in the next decade are going to be critical thinking, complex problem solving, and creativity.
Yeah,
they weren't even on the list 10 years ago. It was all about tech, because a tech solution or a tech advantage will stand you in a good seat for about 5 minutes till somebody else gets it.
Like that's been absolutely outstanding. If you had a billboard that you could put one pithy thing, or an ad, something for new leaders and their bosses to think about as being one of the key things to help them succeed and minimize the chances of success, what would it be?
It'll be curiosity, collaboration, and courage.
There you go. The 3 C's.
3 C's. 3 C's, yeah.
Fantastic. Mike, that's been absolutely awesome. Thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having a chat. I've learned so much. It's been awesome. And we'll have to, one day, if you'll agree again, get you back on the show, because I've got a whole list of stuff that I didn't even ask you about that I'd like to dig into.
Sorry about that. I do tend to go down rabbit holes. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, not at all. No, this was stuff that came up out of our conversation. Anyway, look, it's been awesome. Thanks very much. And we'll look forward to perhaps another time.
Love to. Yeah.
Take care.
Ta-da.
Thanks for listening. If you have a friend or a colleague who would benefit from this episode, please pass the word along. If you have a friend or a colleague who would not benefit, but you haven't been in touch with them for a while, give them a call. iTunes reviews are great to get the word out and to help me create the show that's most useful for you. And if you're frustrated or having challenges or would like some help, guidance, assistance with your first leadership role, then check out integrationcatalyst.com in the link in the podcast notes below. Or pass this on to your boss to nudge them to get you the help you really need to cross the doing to managing chasm and get you powered up on your leadership and management journey. Oh, and if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, hit subscribe. Until next time.